Hey, how you doing? Daniel Ruiz Tizon is available for Monday the 24th of August 2020 with me, Daniel Ruiz Tizon, episode 262. Summer fast disappearing. Hope you're all well, keeping on doing what you need to be doing to keep yourself going. Weather-wise, here in South London, a cooler morning. It's coming up to 10:39 hours. I was wearing four tops. I've just realised I've only got three on because I'm feeling a bit nippy this morning. Unusual for August to be this cold in recent years, but certainly an improvement on the heat wave of 10 or so days ago. I'm thinking I might need to wear two tops for today's lunchtime run. Rain predicted for tomorrow, which threatens to cancel tomorrow's trip to the cemetery with my aunt. There was a danger that was going to be the highlight of my week. I'll now need to find an alternative. I'm recording in a different way this morning. Gives me more space on this cluttered desk. I'm just recording straight into the laptop mic, which I think might only be the second time I've done this, and certainly the first time I think for a full show. I didn't even know I could do this until I discovered it by accident a month or two ago, which tends to be the way things happen with me, but it frees up some space. It means I don't have to get a pile of books, stick a cable from the laptop into the Zoom H1 and balance the Zoom H1 in this box I've got and stick a box of staplers underneath the mic plus a couple of highlighter pens just to keep it balanced, and then I can't see my notes properly either. So I'm hoping that this might make things slightly easier for me. Slow weekend. I'll open with an update on the neighbour. They returned on Saturday afternoon. I can't remember if I mentioned all the details on Thursday's Patreon episode. I'd had an email. I probably didn't actually. I'd had an email on the Thursday evening from the neighbour downstairs, the one on the ground floor, and she told me that the neighbour was coming back. I'd had a text from the neighbour last week. I think that is what I mentioned in the Patreon show. I think I'd come back from a run to find that she texted me saying she was going to be out by the weekend. And of course, as I've maintained throughout, I do feel conflicted about this. Selfishly, I've welcomed the respite from 2 solid years, 4 times a week of these errands. But of course, I'm fond of the neighbour. She's a lovely lady. It saddens me to see her living this life, which is not that different to my own, except, I am the legs of this operation. I've got my health, although I have to say I just about had my health. I just about come off my crutches when when basically these errands came to me by way of what had happened in my life at the time. So I'd only just come off the crutches. So it's possible that all these trips to all these shops helped me recover my health before I took up the running following surgery in the summer of 2018. But I think I had the same concerns as the downstairs neighbour. It just seemed, even though it's been 3 weeks, it seemed still too soon for someone who'd taken a fall and, been lying face down in the same position for almost 4 days. It seemed too soon for them to be coming out of rehab and coming back to the flat with this new setup of 4 care workers or 4 visits from care workers every day. So it wouldn't be a living carer. But, I thought, well, this is the ideal opportunity to just step away from all of this. As I said, again on Thursday's episode, I was determined that I would extricate myself finally from these errands. My aunt had said a while back, the only way that these errands end for you is sadly when your neighbour dies. Well, it didn't quite happen like that, thankfully. But I've been able to make the most of this unwelcome opportunity in the sense that obviously something bad happened to her. I just had to step away from this because, mentally, physically, I'm just exhausted by this, and I need to put myself first when it comes to this situation. She returned on Saturday. There was lots of, communal hallway action. I think that something was done outside by the front doors, almost like a sensor pad. I don't know if quite if it's a door entry pad, because I don't know how a card would work on that, how this sensor would read this card and then open that front door, because nothing's changed with that front door. It's not got, actually it does have there is a door entry system, there's a buzzer system in place, so maybe it's connected to that, so the care workers can maybe activate some card or what have you on this sensor pad and then just come right in. I don't know. I don't quite know what I'm talking about that. I know that there is something by that door, and it was only put up there on Saturday evening, so it's almost certainly connected with the elderly neighbour. I was hearing all this communal hallway activity, and there was some drilling going on into the early evening, so I know that they were putting in grab bars in her bathroom, etc. So I thought, okay, hopefully she's going to be safe. Hopefully I can worry a bit less. Someone's going to be doing these errands for her, and we'll see how we get along. All the time mindful, really, that for the last 2 or 3 years her health has been declining to the extent that this all may be too little, too late. And then yesterday, Sunday morning, I was up early, even though I didn't have any errands to run. I think it's just habit now. It's going to take a while just to get back into that being able to have lions should I want a lion. I think the first 2 or 3 weeks when the neighbour was in hospital, I was just having the lions because I was that tired. They just came automatically. Now that I've settled into that pattern, now that I know that I can have a lion should I want to, I think I'm back to my usual sleeping patterns, going to bed late rather than getting up early again. But thankfully I slept in a bit more. Yesterday morning was when I was up by 8, and I'm glad I didn't have to get the paper, because like small talk, he didn't actually open the shop across the road until 09:30 hours. Anyway, by then I think I'd heard more commotion outside. This time more activity than Saturday morning. Seemed to be more than one person coming up the stairs really loudly, and I thought, well, that sounds like more than one care worker. There just seemed to be some very strange activity going on, lots of banging, and I looked out the window and I saw an ambulance outside, and I thought, already? She's only been back for a night. And sure enough, the ambulance was there for her, and it was there for a while, and I saw her being taken out in a stretcher, which in itself isn't an indicator that something went very wrong, because she's housebound, so it would be the only way to get her down to the ambulance. She had a face mask on. What concerned me was, because I was trying to think to myself, okay, it's a Sunday. Maybe they're taking her to some hospital appointment on a Sunday, and this is how they do it via an ambulance. Looks a bit dramatic, but this is how they're doing it. And then I was thinking, well, what, on a Sunday? And would an ambulance actually pick her up to take her to an appointment? Wouldn't it be some sort of hospital bus service rather than an ambulance? You'd only use an ambulance for an urgent situation. And what really nailed it for me that something might have gone wrong is after they stuck my neighbour in the back of the ambulance stayed out there for at least 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes. And that's never a good sign. I know that from experience. When an ambulance doesn't leave right away, that is a really bad sign, worrying sign. So I have no news on the neighbour at the moment. It's an instance. What really frustrates me about this is it's an example of what happens if you're not proactive. This is something that people have reacted to too late. And I'll come to my visit to the Space Daddies later, but I wanted to check simply because, I do feel slow. I'm not that sharp right now. I don't want to be making any mistakes. So I ran my idea past the Space Daddy. I wanted to know whether I should contact her family before she came back at the weekend, so that right away there wouldn't be any sort of handover period of me doing these errands for a week or two before handing over to a care worker and the Space Daddy. Just to get in front of it right away, send this email, let them know everything has changed and that you can't keep doing this, and that you trust they understand. So I did that and introduced myself to her family, and about a day later I got an email back on Friday evening and thanking me for what I'd done, saying they had no idea that I'd done all this stuff, etc., etc. And I was actually reading this and I was thinking, and I don't think I'm being harsh here, I was thinking, you have no idea that I did this, or that anybody did this, or that other neighbours were doing other things, or because you never asked. It was probably convenient for you not to inquire. Now, you know the situation, you know that this woman is nearly 80, they live on their own, you know their health's not the best because you see them at least once a year at Christmas when you pick her up and take her with you to yours for a couple of days. You know that she's not in great condition, but you have avoided finding out the specifics of her life. You have avoided inquiring as to how she gets about and who might be doing what for her. If she can't get about, how is she getting her stuff done? And you would know better than I do because she's your family. You would know how proud she is and that she may well be keeping stuff from you about how she is functioning. And you see this all the time with people and elderly relatives. And I've worked in healthcare, you know, a couple of stints in different healthcare jobs. One stint involved a really bad time working in social care and just seeing how often families would try to absolve themselves of their responsibilities for older relatives. So this care plan should have been in place a couple of years ago. Now it might be in place now, and hopefully it's not too late for it to do some good. Yesterday morning, that's not a good sign. Had she been getting the help, had people made themselves aware of her situation and not relied on strangers to keep her going and stocked up for the stuff that she needed, she might not have been in this situation now where her health is just crumbling away, where that decline is accelerating. So right now I don't know anything. Fingers crossed she's okay. I'd sent an email back to the neighbour who had told me, I think they're away at the moment, they're outside of London, so they're not going to know about this, I don't think, but they had told me that they were very concerned that this return to the flat was a bit too early for this neighbour, and you know they were right. And I'd said this, as I said this to my aunt. I was concerned it was too soon, given the gravity of the situation that led her to be put in hospital for 3 weeks. It does have me worried. You know, I'm glad that I've removed myself from that situation. And yeah, as I was going to say, you know, I'd got back to the neighbour and just said, look, her family need to step up. I've been doing this for 2 years. I'm like you. I think it's too soon for her to be coming back. But from a selfish point of view, this is what I'm going to do. And I'm going to contact her family. And I'm stepping back from this because, you know, I'm not a professional carer. This, you know, I've got things to do with my aunt and uncle, which are enough of a strain. And that's my family. Little voice in my head, those numbskulls that allow those awful catnap dreams to come through. They've had me send this email now, and I'm hoping that nothing even more serious has happened to the neighbour, because I've sent that email out to the neighbour downstairs, and it might just make me seem very callous now, which I don't think I am. The week had taken a more stressful turn, I think, on Friday, which really derailed my work on Friday. I'd set Friday aside for a good day on the laptop, working away on the stuff I needed to work on, including the writing. And I've got so much admin-y stuff right now going on. And these contractors, one of two companies that came to put in tenders for the windows, you know, to put in new windows in the building, which are much needed. I mean, these windows, they're just rotting and they vibrate on this main road. You might hear them vibrating during this show. The flat is cold in winter. I think that's more probably to do with the radiators than the windows. And there is double glazing in the bathroom. And I mean, that window is going to be replaced as well, the frosted bathroom window. But when I open that window, I realise how much noise double glazing blocks out. So from a recording point of view, I'd certainly love double glazing windows. But these guys called up, and I'd been told that they'd lost out on the tender, you know, back in the spring, just before we went into lockdown. Now they called me again. They weren't great to deal with originally. I thought the other windows company was a bit better than these guys. Obviously, the pandemic has changed things now, so these guys, for whatever reason, have got the job again. And they were trying to get me to agree to an early October week-long, basically turning the flat into a building site. Right away, it set alarm bells ringing. First of all, logistically, I don't have the time right now to be moving all this stuff. I just can't do it on my own because they said, for various reasons, partly because of the work itself, but partly because we're in a pandemic. You've got to take all these extra precautions. So dust sheets is not going to cover it. They want carpets lifted. They want settees, everything covered. Okay, that's kind of normal. Less sure about the carpets being covered. I would think that dust sheets hopefully would suffice. It would mean severe interruption to Star Wars football, which would be into its Christmas countdown season by then. It also means that I've then got to find the money to replace all the blinds because the blinds are battered. They've been here for about 20 years. They're awful. One of them I can't even open it. Sorry, I banged the table there. So I've got to find the money for that as well. And that will be more disruption as well. And can that be done on the day, or am I looking at a period of days where I'm effectively going to be in my own reality show with nothing on the windows? As I've said to you before in recent shows, or maybe back in the spring, I've never been in a flat where the windows were replaced. I just didn't know anything about this, so I simply thought that this was something that could be done in a day. And when I said this to my uncle last week, he just shook his head and he gestured to their windows. He said that took a week to do the whole flat, and their flat's bigger, but he said it took a whole week. So I didn't realise that. I didn't realise that it would be a week-long period of disruption. Now, if it wasn't for the pandemic, I'd just go through with it. It would be as traumatic as having the floors done a few years ago. But this is not the time to be having contractors in your flat. Now, I've also got the roof thing going on. The plumber came last week. I covered that again as well in Thursday's episode. So the plumber had confirmed that the leak in the back room is the roof. It's not the water tank. The water tank is on the other side in the loft. So, yet again, pedant that I am, I was right. It is the roof. I bang on about these things and people always say, oh, he's obsessive about this, about that. But at the end of the day, much like my dad, I call things right. I knew that roof wasn't right. I used to work in that study. I knew where the stains were, and I'm glad I took that plumber's advice from last year where he just said, look, draw pencil marks around these stains, and if you see the stains expanding beyond these pencil marks, you've still got the leak. So got that work going on. That's going to be disruptive. Unfortunately for the neighbour downstairs on the ground floor, it's going to be disruptive for her. It's going to be disruptive for the halfway house next door. I think I don't get disrupted until the decorators come in to fix that room, which I would imagine painting that room will just take a day. I'm lucky on that front because they can't get access to the roof from here. So anyone that needs to come in is simply going to be coming in to review the work. It's going to be a short visit. It's not going to be a bunch of builders coming in, scaffolders in the flat. And obviously I feel sorry for the neighbour downstairs that the scaffolding would disrupt her, and it will, but the work ultimately is going to be done outdoors, so she'll be safer than when she has the window contractors coming in. Now, my understanding from speaking to these contractors is that every flat in the building, I think there's 6 or 7, apart from myself, apart from the elderly neighbour because she's not been around, we are the last to agree dates, to confirm dates for this work being done. That might set me apart as being awkward, which maybe I am, but it might set me apart for being awkward. And the housing association who I spoke to afterwards spoke to a woman that was very difficult to speak to. She sounded too well spoken to be doing that kind of job for a start, but she kept jumping in on everything that I was saying. And at the end I said to her, look, you haven't actually let me finish anything. Now, yes, you might be thinking, well, I can cut him off on this point because I'm going to make this point, which is what he's talking about, but at least let me express myself. Let me complete the sentences I'm trying to give you that highlight how concerned I am about this. It's not a small flat, but it's not a big flat. And I'm now going to be social distancing in a flat with any number of glazers in here, all masked up. I'll be masked up. We don't know how this winter is going to pan out yet. This is going to be the first winter of several with this pandemic. Why does the work need to be carried out this winter? Why can't we wait? Why can't we bounce this back until we have a better idea of what is going on? I've gone to the trouble of isolating on my own for 20 plus weeks. I've got a bubble with my aunt and a very sick uncle. I don't want to be jeopardizing anything, least of all myself. And then I said, obviously, It was on my mind, what about the bathroom? If this work goes ahead, I don't want your builders using this bathroom. I actually said that. And I think that if ever there was a time where you could say that and be realistic about such conditions being laid down for any work being done in your flat, it is now. This is a very dangerous time to be having complete strangers using the bathroom. That's not a good thing. So I said to them, well, actually, they said to me at this point, well, we've noted your concerns. Well, forget about noting my concerns. What does that mean? Because I don't want you sending these builders here. You've noted the concerns. You haven't relayed the concerns to them. You haven't put a portaloo outside. These guys are coming thinking they can use the bathroom. So you've got to do more than note my concerns. Are you going to stick a portaloo out there? Because every time they've had builders, the housing association, every time over the last few years they've had builders, I've never seen a portaloo out there. I see it for other buildings, but this housing association doesn't seem to throw in a portaloo for its builders. So that's a real concern. And I didn't inquire as to whether any of the other flats had laid down similar conditions. And ideally, in this situation, you want uniformity. You want all the flats to be in agreement. I don't want to be the only flat having a bathroom ban on workmen. They might be leaving the flat for a bit. I say, where are you going? Oh, we're going downstairs to use their bathroom. They might say pointedly, that's going to make me look very anal, which I am. But I think, under the circumstances, I think I'm right to be anal about this. This is not the time to be doing this kind of work. Why can't we wait until the new year? Waited a long enough time to get the windows done. They don't need to be done right now. I said this to my aunt. She said, you'll be warmer in the winter though. And I was, yeah, but I want to live to see another winter. What if this is my last winter? I pick up the virus off these guys or off the toilet seat and I collapse. And the last thing I might glimpse would be these brand new double glazing windows that I'm never going to benefit from, that I'm never going to be able to record a better soundproofed show with. I have to say, medication or no medication, that has made me anxious. And of course, the matter is out of my hands. I'm not the leaseholder, so I've got to wait and hear what's happening with that. I'm supposed to be hearing back today, so I'm a little concerned about that. I've also got the Amazon issue that I mentioned on last Monday's show, that they're saying that I broke the terms of the agreement, that I had employees, associates or friends or family exploiting that Amazon link to buy stuff so I could get money. And I pointed out, well, I've only made £70 this year. There's hardly any incentive to try and break this. There is the incentive to try and grow the use of that link. Of course there is. And as I said on the shows last week, on both shows, the Amazon affiliates model does work. It just hasn't worked brilliantly for me. But I know that I've seen enough from it over the last 5 years to know that if I had a more commercial show, if my work was better known, then it might have helped me more. But I'm not going to jeopardize this. I'm not going to be dishonest just, when I've been making £35 a week, a quarter actually. I got a payment at the start of the year and I got a payment back in July. All helpful, absolutely better than nothing. But why after 5 years am I going to change that? And I'd spoken to the Space Daddy about this on Thursday, and I told them that Amazon, they turned down my appeal on Thursday. They said that was it. I'm terminated with immediate effect. You've got to remove the link from your site, which I haven't done. But don't click on the link because, it's not going to make me any money because they're not going to send me any money. But I've not removed the link. Not yet. And he said, they're questioning your honesty. You can't let this lie, which I agree with, but it's Amazon. Amazon and Facebook, these big organizations, faceless organizations that never put a name to their emails, that send you these template emails telling you you're being thrown off for this and that. That's what happened with Amazon. Didn't even address me by my name, and there was no name at the end of their emails. So you can't let this lie, and I agree with that, but it's so difficult to speak to them. So I was spending, I spent about 30 minutes on Friday afternoon, and I did a long Twitter thread about this, and all I could get was a customer service contact number. I clicked the chat box, they called me back, had to wait a while before I was finally connected to someone. Then I was speaking to some employee who was obviously, not happy to be at Amazon. You could hear it in her voice, and that's understandable. And she told me, look, even though we're part of Amazon, we can't call the affiliates department. We're not allowed to call them. I can send an email for you, and you can also use that link they sent in their original email to appeal it. I said, well, I've done that. I'm not going to send another email on that link. I've been terminated, and I'm explaining to you that I haven't done these things that they've said I've done, and I'm not being given the opportunity to prove it because I haven't been shown any evidence of what I'm supposed to have done. If there is evidence, show me. I can't counter anything. I can only tell you that I'm an honest guy and that I haven't sought to exploit this link because it's not worth it. Because even though these small payments, when they happen from time to time, have been helpful in covering the odd bill or two or bandwidth costs, they're not going to change. They're not going to change my life. Sorry, that's the throat going. They're not going to change my life. So is it worth the hassle that I now have of being thrown off this affiliate scheme, and I've got to spend all this time trying to get back on it? Of course it's not. And why would I then call you knowing full well I'm not even going to be put through to the affiliates department? Why would I again spend more time on this if I was guilty? I'd just accept being kicked off and think, well, I've got away with that. I've got away with this. I've made a good bit of money from them. They've caught up with me now. They've seen what I was doing. Wasn't honest. I've broken the agreement. I'm off. But hey, screw them. I've made all this money. There's none of that because I haven't done it. The only way for me to make money from that Amazon link is the way I was doing it, which is plugging it via the podcast. If I don't plug that Amazon affiliates link via the podcast, if I don't tell listeners how this work can be supported, there's no point in me having an affiliates link. And I went down that route 5 years ago because there were other shows doing it, and there are still plenty of shows doing it. I've not broken the rules. To be told that I have, to have the repercussions now where I'm having to spend time looking at an advertising model, which I'm going to have to spend more time on later today, and, start doing pitches, and, my platform provider isn't compatible with the podcast agency, advertising agency that I've signed with. So I've then got to screenshot analytics to back up my pitches for advertising, which of course the analytics are not going to look great because this is a tiny show and I don't get the downloads. So the whole thing is it's got me going around in circles. I've got no option but to try and go down the advertising route now. I'm putting a new show together. I've seen the artwork for it. It's almost completed. It's really impressive artwork. I'm really happy with it. The show will involve a lot of work, and right away I'm going into this new show without the option of supporting it with an Amazon affiliates link. And this new show is likely to be hopefully bigger. It's a more commercial show, hopefully bigger. There is an audience out there for it, but I'm already starting at a disadvantage. So it's just something else to deal with. And of course, if it was a different organization, maybe I'd get further with this, but I'm dealing with Amazon. I've got the Facebook situation. I still can't post properly on the page. I've got no control over the Facebook page. I can't even delete it if I want to delete it. This online world, it gives you options. It can be good for your work, but it can also be incredibly difficult. It brings up so many hurdles. But at the end of the day, I haven't done what Amazon say I've done. I've got to see if I can salvage this situation. Daniel Ruiz Tizon is available, episode 262. Looking at the time on the show, already over half an hour long. I was hoping for a shorter show today. I've got minimal notes, and here I am just yapping. Ways, as always, well, not as always, because obviously the Amazon thing changes things. Ways to support the show: iTunes reviews, Apple Podcasts, if you call it Apple Podcasts. It's just 30 seconds of your time. If you have an Apple Podcast account, they're free. If you download podcasts via iTunes, it's just 30 seconds of your time to rate and review the show if you like it. If you don't like it, no point. That's not going to help. But if you do like the show, an iTunes review is a massive thing, particularly for a small indie show. It helps increase the show's visibility in the iTunes store. And you can support the show if you're not committing to the Patron. You can support the show every now and then via the PayPal or coffee.com links at danielruiztizon.com. any donations that come via either of those two points, I will transfer that week's Patreon show to you if you're not already a Patreon supporter. But of course, most importantly, the best way to support this work is via the Patreon page. It's just £6 a month or £3 a month if you just want to go for the toe dipper option. And you're getting at the moment nearly 2 hours of content every week. And the toe dipper is a second tier just introduced in the last month or so for those who might be unsure about committing to supporting the show. Everyone now in the UK, the EU and the US can now pledge in their local currency of euros, British pounds or US dollars. That means you're not paying any extra conversion fees from your bank or your card when pledging in a currency that's not your own. Patrons say they're working on additional currencies. The conversion rates now pass on to creators. If it helps grow this, that's fine with me. So patreon.com/DRT available. Sign up there to support a different kind of podcast. Join the 16, keeping this show alive. We lost one patron last week, unfortunately. Auditions to replace them very much welcomed. Unlocked for all, and up on the Patreon page is a copy of the film that I co-wrote 15 years ago, Bubbles. I've stuck that on the Patreon. Hour long, I co-wrote it with Sam Neofitu, an old writing partner who directed it as well. It's, as I say, it's 15 years old. It stands up well visually, I think, like any little, well, not little, let's not say little, because I think it was a fairly ambitious project. But it's a small indie film. The budget was very limited, and it means that the project had quite a few flaws. By the time it was made, I was off the project. It went off in a different direction. I was young, I was temperamental. I made that decision then. I've often been someone to not afraid I always get confused with this, cut their nose off to spite their face. I think that's the saying. I've done plenty of that throughout my life. That's all water under the bridge now. It's the first time I've seen it. It was sent to me by Sam last week, and I watched it. There's still enough of my stuff left in there to say, yeah, that co-writing credit, I deserve that, and I'm pleased I got one. Did have a good time for the most part writing that in my younger days. Yeah, it's a shame it wasn't able to attract bigger financing, like a lot of projects done on a budget. Those limitations can and do often impact on any labour of love. So that's not just a new thing that's been happening in the digital age. I think that's just been the writer's lot for a long time now. So that's Bubbles. You can watch it, patreon.com/DRT available. It's set in Green Lanes in the old London Greek community. And although I don't know North London well at all, I used to spend a lot of time there up until the mid-noughties, and I would imagine that those communities are still there, unlike South London, where those communities have all but gone. Worth the watch anyway, and it is unlocked for all. Thursday evening, I went to see The Space Daddy via a visit to my aunt. Stopped off at my aunt's first. She'd slated my beard, rightly so, I suppose. It led to me telling her and my uncle, who actually looked captivated, because I often worry that I just talk too much when I'm there, and they're both thinking, oh my God, he's like that. He's like his dad. He just doesn't stop. So she slated my beard. She doesn't mess around. If she doesn't like something, she'll tell you. She didn't like the beard. I just had to take it on the bearded chin, the heavily bearded chin. Thought to myself, yeah, it's got to go. After that, I went to see The Space Daddy. He wanted to test out some new film equipment that he had. I walked into his flat. I hadn't seen him since early March. First time I've ever seen him in shorts. He's got very youthful legs, I have to say. Very youthful legs. And the Space Daddy's brother, who's always been a very muscular guy, he opened the door to me. I said, look, how does this work? Do I need the mask? How am I coming in here? He said, you don't need to worry about that. Just come in. It was good to see both of them. The brother, looking very muscular, the Space Daddy, you could clearly see that he's still been surviving largely on the frozen food section of the Nine Elms Monster across the road from him. I've said before, he's someone who just doesn't like cleaning. He's a hoarder. Things break, they don't throw them out. He's got a TV that belonged to my aunt that doesn't work anymore, a massive TV, one of those old CRT TVs that's on the floor, and behind it, on a stand, is another big TV that works, but they've not got rid of the other TV that doesn't work. There were large bed frames that he pushed to the back end of the room, and he'd made a little corner for himself with his camera, which was quite ambitious on his part, given that he's pushing, I think, 19 stones, and this was a very tiny little space. I do remember him because he used to MC at parties in our younger days. I remember him at one party MCing, and I can't believe that he got away with, during his MCing, all he was doing was naming the Wimbledon team from the 96-97 season 1 to 11 and then starting again. I'm guessing everyone was drunk, so they absolutely lapped it up. But then about 15 years later, actually, this is around, no, less than that, around 2010, we went to a party, I think in the Belvedere area. A friend of ours had just moved there, got married a few months earlier, and was going to decorate this home he'd bought with his new wife. And before they decorated it, they wanted to have one big party. And they had a proper DJ in all, the turntables, etc. People taking different turns on the decks, and the space daddy got in. Again, this was in a very tight corner, and he actually couldn't get out of that corner afterwards. And I remember his concern when he told me, I think I might be stuck here. We were able to get him out of that corner with some difficulty and almost some damage to the turntables. So anyway, he was sat in this corner filming me. All I had to do was talk normally to him. He just wanted to test the lighting, test all these various bits of equipment. And he'd piled all this stuff high up behind him. And of course, inevitably, it came tumbling down on him. He was lucky that he wasn't seriously hurt because this bed frame was solid wood. It came down on his head. I had to rush over, help lift it off him. And I guarantee you that the next time I go there, the bed frame will still be there. They just don't throw anything out. And that front room, it's a nice front room. It is just cluttered with things that are no longer used. And yet somehow he's turned it into a little studio for his filming. On returning home from the Space Daddies, and it was good to see him because when that stuff came down on him, when he was doing his, his pratfalling, his Frank Spencer routine, it didn't surprise me because those kind of things always happened with him. But I found myself laughing, and really, it had been a while since I'd laughed, and you just realise this is what I've been missing. This is what you get from friends. I get that from my aunt and uncle, to be fair, watching them row, but I'm getting this from someone of my own generation. And it made me feel good. I was glad that I'd ventured out. I still had the Patron episode to edit, so I was in for a really long night, and I was so hyped up by that night I didn't go to bed till 4 a.m. actually. And I got back from the Space Daddies via the Nine Elms Monster. I had to do some shopping. I got back around 2200 hours, got the beard trimmer out, just shaved it all off. That evening, hearing my aunt telling me how rubbish that beard was, I felt... Well, it did feel weird seeing my face again. My head and my face looked unusually small as opposed to thin, but I just thought, wow, I've never seen my head look that small. Of greater concern to me was that my lips looked like they were pouting. And I'm wondering if the pouting was something that had developed and escalated during the 2-month beard period. Maybe my lips had gotten used to pulling certain facials that I wasn't picking up because of the beard. So that's something I need to address, but my lips definitely looked like they were pouting. Now a quick Howard Hughes-esque shout-out to my cousin Charlie, who turns 22 tomorrow on Tuesday. I'm usually a day out with getting birthdays right these days, but I think it's Tuesday rather than today. I've said it before, 22, that was my favourite age. You've got past 21, which I think is too big a deal. It's a milestone age like 18, and you're settling into being a young adult, but you're still young enough to get away with being a dick at times. It was my favourite age. After 22, downhill all the way for me. Obviously, my cousin Charlie, he's unlikely to look back at his first pandemic-era birthday with much fondness in the future. Chances are he might be in his late 20s before we beat this thing. Who knows? But anyway, happy birthday, Charlie. Hope it's a good one for you. He does follow in the family line of introverts. We turn out either show-offs like my aunt, the Chin, and my goddaughter, or we have the quieter types, my uncle, my oldest cousin, myself, and now Charlie, who reminds me of Kendall Roy in Succession in both the way he carries himself with every word he says, being carefully measured. He also looks like the guy who played Kendall Roy so magnificently, Jeremy Strong, which for me, I mean, I don't know what happened to the Emmys. Were they cancelled? I don't know. I think the Emmys did actually happen earlier this year, just before the lockdown kicked in globally. But Jeremy Strong should definitely have won the Emmy. It was an incredible performance he put in during that second series. Over the weekend, I did cut my hair on Saturday. It took nearly a couple of hours. I think I'd like to get clippers that are a bit closer to the scalp, which would save time. You know, I would have liked the option of a 0.5 trimmer. Instead, I think I've got a 1. So I take the 1 off and I just go with the actual blade itself, but it still doesn't take off as much as I'd like. And I think it was a better cut than 2, but not as good. Or as well, I'd say actually no. To be fair, I think it's as decent an effort as Lockdown Cut 1. 2 wasn't, because I think 2 I did it within a couple of weeks of the first haircut. There wasn't enough to take off, and it became very difficult. I didn't get as much reading done this weekend, nowhere near as much as I'd hoped. In fact, I just felt quite tired. I'm still on The Death House by Sarah Pinborough, discussed on episode 261, more than halfway through it now. It is very good. She is such a good writer, and I'm really enjoying it. It's a library book, which got me thinking about borrowing library books in this pandemic. I think we should go back to the old school stamping them method, perhaps with COVID-19 era specific stamps, so users get an idea of how frequently that book has been borrowed during a pandemic. You could expand the idea further with the following, but admittedly this would be hard to implement. But I'm thinking there may be a book on the library shelf that hasn't been borrowed during the pandemic, but a book that was borrowed during the pandemic, if you're still with me, a book that has been borrowed during this lockdown, and then after the 3-day quarantining period, these returned books are subjected to. This book is returned to the shelf next to this book that hasn't been borrowed during this lockdown. And I'm thinking perhaps that unborrowed book should have some coloured sticker placed on its binding to denote proximity to books that have been borrowed during the pandemic age. I mean, it's an ambitious plan, but certainly that's how I'd be thinking if I was a librarian. An epic fail on my part that keeps happening more and more. I did a wash and I'd left a tissue in my indoor-only tracksuit bottoms as I washed all my running gear and indoor-only clothes towards the end of last week. Obviously, that tissue had broken up in the wash and bits of it were on all the newly washed clothes. I've done this so many times now. I dry everything over by the windows in winter and summer, as that's where the radiator is. But that part of the room also happens to be where Star Wars football happens. And by the end of Friday night, there were loads of bits of dried tissue littering the pitch. The end of week fixtures, the results of which I'll give out on Thursday's regular Star Wars football update, were played on a pitch that looked a lot like the 1978 Buenos Aires ticker tape final. Buenos Aires? Am I Australian? Buenos Aires ticker tape final. The ball was running into fragments of tissue paper. The game was much slower. It wasn't a good situation. Wasn't conducive to some good Star Wars football. Coming towards the end of the show, now to this week's Nectar Points update. I did both my shops on Thursday. I topped up the Oyster unregistered. TFL don't need to know where you're going. The obsession organisations have these days with tracking your movements is incredible. Gloves on the bus for boarding. I use the gloves as well to handle the baskets. I noted that my glove to rail handling on buses is poor, particularly on the disembarking. I'm sliding the gloved hands down the stair rail on the buses, which I shouldn't. But the old method of disembarking using my elbows to support myself, COVID has killed that, so I need to come up with an alternative. And I'm also thinking about being on buses in your big winter coat. That's going to be a test, because regardless of how you disembark from a bus, that big winter coat on the narrow staircase is going to be making contact with the sides of that bus stairway as you're going down. You're going to need to be careful where you're hanging your winter coat up when you get home. So that's something to be mindful of come the winter. No chance of another little steak. I was in the Stockwell shop on Thursday, thankfully, a break from the Brixton Pistons. And patrons will know how awful the little steak I had last week was. So I'm not going to be familiarizing myself again with a steak from there anytime soon. I missed the expiry date on the reduced fat coleslaw that I'd bought the week before last and had to be eaten by the 22nd. I took a risk last night by having it a day out of date in a sandwich. I'm not a big sandwich eater. I think them a little overrated, and also I get frustrated that a filling can often lead to bread breakage. And I associate them with being stuck with a man and hurrying a sandwich on a short lunch break, so short so you can get the hell out of the office and away from all those 9 to 5ers as soon as possible. But I thought I can't throw that coleslaw away. I have to have some sort of impact on this purchase. I hate wastage. It was the smallest coleslaw available, but still way too big for someone living on their own. And I'm just not in the habit of eating coleslaw these days. It's not something that I eat. I'm really struggling with my throat here. I'll have to apologise. I am apologising. I'm sorry. I'm sorry about this throat. Had some coleslaw with the calzone the day before. It was expiring. Yeah, it was expiring on the 22nd. That was Saturday. And then I had some more of it yesterday. Little blueberries were back up to 115 after their significant discount the week before. I can't remember what that discount was. Let's move on to the actual nectar points now. Sloth Saturday's calzone conversion, by the way, problematic fold over, more of a fissure really, just a near complete separation of the bread. I'd mounted the toppings too high. That's something for me again to try and learn from. Let's have a look what I earned last week on the nectar points. Let's remember the 3 nectar points that I used to get for the Neighbours Radio Times. Those are all gone now for good. And I'd gone in there with a points balance of 117, and I bought 6 pints of semi-skinned. I bought the spicy chicken budget pizza, bought some Sainsbury's crackers. I'm currently, I think, finishing a little packet of crackers because they really break quite easily, so I'm certain they're from Lidl. Bought a natural yogurt, not the usual one. It was a kilo of natural yogurt, but my usual one wasn't in there. Medikills floor wipes, bought some of those. I bought a Dishmatic handle, one of those long sponge things for the washing ups. Try and be a bit kinder to my hands. Bought some antibacterial wipes. Just a single tin of beans, Sainsbury's own beans, 30p. Newgate beans, still no sign of them in Lidl. 4 single oranges, they've gone up from 28p to 30p, but they've been of a better quality recently, and a single loose baking potato for 48p. I think I'm going to have to invest in one of those weird bags they introduce for fruit and veg. I don't quite know how it works, but just putting the oranges and the potato in a basket, particularly in this era, it just doesn't really sit well with me. So I spent £11, 8 pence. The previous points balance was 117. I earned 11 points last Thursday. That gave me a new points balance of 128. That means my nectar points are worth 64p. If you ever want to get your store card points in, or just want to email the show in general, DRT available at westegg1607.co.uk. I think it might have been a while since I gave out that email address. Before I finally leave you, just a couple of things that I need to work on improving. My 4-coloured Bic, I keep taking it into bed along with a notepad, but the nib on the 4-coloured pen is always out. I end up marking the bedding, something I feel that I need to get on top of, because the bedding has taken on the appearance of a child's bedding with all these pen marks. My coffee glass technique, I need to start picking it up when I've made my coffee. I need to start picking it up via the handle rather than the rim. I just keep having to hurry it over to my desk with a camp walk that accelerates because the glass starts burning the palm of my hand. Actually, I think I've forgotten to tell you about the catnap dream I had yesterday morning. It was after 11:30, and I slept through till 1300 hours. I felt very groggy. It was a very deep sleep, so I plunged into this dream. I'll go through it very quickly. It's a very strange dream. I think I was in the oval area. Every time I go back to the man in a dream, it's always in the oval, and I don't think I've ever worked in the oval, so that's rather curious. So I was working in the oval in this company. I was getting on great with the new colleagues, which was really strange, and I was trying to clean the desk. So it was a COVID-19 dream. I was thinking, okay, I'm back with the man. I don't really want to be back right now. I don't want to be back full stop with the man, but right now, at this particular time in the world's history, no. So I'm trying to work out how I can ask for some antibacterial wipes without appearing very anal. I'm seeing a poor uptake of masks among my new dream colleagues. What I liked about it is I was very popular with the female staff in this dream, and a couple of them made a point of coming over to introduce themselves to me, and I was coming across as very laid back. At one point, I was topless. I don't know what is with that. Then I was told I had to move desk. I had to go and sit behind my line manager. He'd been sitting to my right because another colleague who normally sat at the desk that I'd been told to sit at, he'd come back. He wasn't keen to give up his desk, so he took over a desk that had been freshly cleaned for him. I had to go and sit behind those two, so it was a situation where I was again facing the wall, which reminded me of the job I was in with the Fonz 2009, 2010, where I had to spend, what was it, 8 months, 7 months facing the wall, and then I was told I wasn't mixing well with other staff. Well, I've got my back turned to other staff. That's hardly a great position from which to build some very laid back, popular with colleagues demeanor. All they're doing is seeing the back of my head. I come in with a haircut, they're going to be able to assess right away, well, that high fade, we can see what he was trying to do with that, but he didn't quite pull it off. So I was sat again facing the wall, and rather strangely in a big double bed. So I was on this double bed. I was having to work from this double bed. It was really strange. At one point I'd found the loos, which pleased me because that's a big part of working with a man. You need to find a loo, but it needs to be on a different floor to the one that you work on. You don't want your colleagues seeing you coming out of the loo. That's just something I don't like. So I found the loos. I was back at my desk, but working from a double bed. And there was this big guy next to me, white guy who'd actually shaved his head in the same style that I'd shaved mine at the weekend. He was massive. He had lots of tattoos, which indicated he was my age because they were the Celtic tattoos, which were very fashionable among my generation in the mid-90s. He was topless. He was in his pants on the edge of the bed. So I'm thinking, is this bed for the both of us? Because I can't see his bed. I've got my bed by my desk, but he's sitting on my bed, and it was a huge bed, so I think we were sharing it. And he was spraying himself or slapping some aftershave on that smelt so strong that I could taste it when I woke up. And, some of the colleagues who knew him well enough to take issue in a light-hearted fashion, but pointed fashion, with the absolute stench of this aftershave. They started mentioning it, and he started laughing. And I chipped in. I thought, well, look, he's the biggest guy here, but he's obviously, he seems like a nice guy because, he's taken all this stick off his colleagues. It's being done in a nice, light-hearted manner. This is a chance for me to ingratiate myself with my new colleagues. And I just chipped in with, yeah, it stinks. It really reminds me of 70s aftershave. He did not take that well at all. And he pinned me down on the bed, on this double bed. He was in his pants, by the way, and he just started rubbing his neck. It was his neck where he'd slapped on this aftershave, started rubbing it all over my body where I started to stink of this aftershave, this horrible aftershave that he was wearing. And as I say, I woke up around 1300 hours, woke up from this dream. That was the last scene in the dream, and I could almost taste this awful aftershave. So it was another odd catnap dream. And that is it. That is the end of this week's regular show. Bowing out with a catnap. Patreon listeners, you'll get your weekly bonus edition, episode 263. That's out on Thursday. If you guys want to join the 16, sign up at patreon.com/DRT available and support a long-running indie podcast. Thank you all for listening. If you're not joining us on Thursday, I'm back next Monday with episode 264. Get those shoulders back. Keep on walking towards the sun. Wash those hands. I'm Daniel Ruiz Tizon, and this start of the week I have been available.